All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, a podcast to promote and improve your practice as an athletic trainer. I am Jeremy Jackson, host of the Sports Medicine Broadcast, and Susan and Tony wanted to discuss modern racism and what it looks like for me as an athletic trainer, for me as a white male, what I've learned, how I've changed. And so since Susan wanted to take over the show, Susan, I'm going to let you finish the intro. You got it.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Hey guys, my name is Susan. I am currently in health and safety at JJ Taylor Distributing. I've been in the profession for 4 years, and boy, I have seen multiple industrial athletic training settings, and it's been awesome being able to grow my practice and actually move into the administration side of things over the past first 4 in the profession. So, Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tony Hunter. I'm a head athletic trainer at secondary school level. Definitely enjoying the process. Feeling very fortunate by God's grace and favor in regards to what we're doing with our program and the services that we're able to provide to our student athletes. Been in the game for, 10 years now. Been certified for 10 years, very fortunate, went through Minnesota State from undergrad, Ball State for my grad, did my fellowship at Oregon State. So just wanted to highlight them as they were definitely a part of this process and a part of who I am now. But other than that, just enjoying the AT life. I definitely see the challenges that are in the climate of athletic training right now, whether we're talking about how we're valued, whether it's compensation or work-life balance, and obviously with COVID, that has put a huge, damper on our profession. So definitely feeling the heat, seeing the heat, and just praying for our AT community.
So, and how long have you been in athletic training, Jeremy? I should know, but I can't remember.
This is year 18. So actually, if you look at the whole thing, I was a student athletic trainer in high school for 4 years, in college for 5 years, and then this is my 18th year as a professional, 15th year here at Pasadena High School.
Wow. So how do you feel athletic training looks like? I mean, compared to 18 years ago?
Well, when I first started, there wasn't any sort of Scat 5. Like, it was like, oh, your head hurts? Oh, it went away? All right, cool. That kind of thing. And so that, just so much more. Like, it's so different. And then I've talked so much about the podcast that I did with Dr. Zach Winkleman out at South Carolina, where I was talking about patient-centered approach to athletic training services. And I would say out of the last 5 years, that's been the single most impactful, because it kind of sets the stage for what we're talking about here, is because I'm focusing on the patient instead of me. Like, oh, well, this is my life experience. This is what I know. Well, how about I take into account your background, your history, your experience, your understanding, your fears. Right. And so I think there's a huge shift in athletic training towards that right now. And since I am 40 years old, I'm 18 years, so I'm not at the end of my career and I'm not at the beginning. I feel like I am right there in the middle, to where I am part of the new wave of older people issuing out the old, just suck it up, rub some dirt on it, because, man, I hate that. I hate that, rub some dirt on it, just suck it up. That's not my job. My job is to help you get better, help you accomplish your goal. And so I think as the older ones retire, that's what they knew. They were more coaches. And so the younger ones are coming in more patient focused and centered. I think that's the biggest shift I see. It definitely looks different, because, we had the full length scar for ACL when I first started, and now there's just the 4 incisions or whatever it is, like that kind of thing. Just more or less everything is better, has improved.
Right. Well, and I'm sure, so when you were getting into this, I mean, was there even a thought of something like cultural competency, or how to weave those those factors or into your patient care?
I don't know. I'm not very, I guess, perceptive of those things around me. I would say I don't know if self-centered is the right word, but like more self-contained. Like I'm just like, okay, I'm in my little bubble, and that's I'll take care of what I have to take care of, and not concerned with anything outside of that. And so for me personally, there was never a thought of cultural competency, because the school I went to, it was probably like the high school I went to was probably like 50% white, maybe 30% black, and then like Hispanic, Asian, Indian mixed in there as well. And those numbers could be off, but it's probably similar to that. And so it wasn't like I grew up in a all white neighborhood, but I obviously didn't understand everything that was going on in those different houses. And so I think just for me, because of this is how I am, I wasn't thinking about all that until the last couple of years.
So, I mean, what about the school? What about Pasadena? I mean, how's that demographic changed in the 15 years you've been there?
It
Hasn't?
I would say, if anything, it has become more Hispanic.
Okay.
I would say it's about 95% Hispanic, and then you got some white and even fewer black students. And I would say it's pretty much the same. Maybe more non-white teachers since I've been here, but overall, I think it's about the same student population.
Over 20 years, that's pretty solid. That's so interesting you say that. So for you growing up and being someone who is pretty like in your own zone, is that, I mean, I can only imagine being surrounded by so many Hispanic students and Latinx students has changed your perspective and taught you a lot, at least for the almost 20 years you've been there, would you think? Or
I don't know. I mean, in college, I went and lived in Mexico for a month so I could learn Spanish. And so it's not like it's in like high school I took Spanish. So it's not like I was like, oh, hey, I've never been around Hispanics. But it was always I guess just an unawareness of the culture, or an insensitivity to the culture more than an unawareness. Because, like like I said, most people, we would have made some sort of, I don't know if a racist joke, but race-based joke, about, oh, well, Mexicans do this, or, Hispanics do this, that kind of thing. And I've definitely moved away from that. And so I don't know, I'm lost. So.
Well, you're actually saying, it's actually funny that you say that, because that is a very common thing. I would say even in American culture, is in my opinion, it kind of ties into a bit, what would be the best way to describe it? A kind of duality that a lot of minorities live with. And Tony, you might even know this better than I do, just because we kind of have had similar education histories as far as the diversity of where we educated, though you were probably even a little bit before me. But it's basically, at least on the minority side of things, even when you are a plurality, the culture that we live in is so pervasive that even when minorities are in the plurality, we still find ourselves living with this duality of who we are as minorities, and then the common acceptable cultural norms, which often do not represent us as minorities. And it's something that people who aren't minorities honestly can be in an environment where they're the minority and they still don't feel the stress of that duality, just because culture or American society is so supportive of them. I actually even see it when I travel. I know Mercedes is on here talking about her travel adventures last week, but I have gone to other countries and I have seen Americans behaving in such a way that I could never, even in the US, but it's that idea of their support for who they are is so strong that they don't even feel the need to change when they're in an environment when they're not the majority. And I think it's something that's almost unique to non-minority Americanness. Tony, I don't know if you can tell me if I'm
No,
way off base.
just a quick point to add. I think one of the challenges is for us is, although sometimes we may be the majority in number, that doesn't mean that we're the majority in control and power, right, within the systems that we're operating in. So I think sometimes, again, for us, we may be the majority within the neighborhood. We may be the majority within the community. We may be with the majority within the system. But, do we feel, like Susan said, do we feel like we have that support from the people who make the decisions? So when we don't feel like we may have that support from ones who are making the decisions, then we still feel like, we still feel like we don't have a true place or a true value because we feel like our actions may be scrutinized or judged differently.
Right.
That's funny you guys are saying that, because it really is what I was just saying. I'm in my own little world because, all right, well, cool, I can do whatever I want. And it's funny that I'm just now catching on this. Like, well, that's because this is the way, our country is, yeah, if I went to Mexico, I would just be myself. I wouldn't try to blend in, but that's also, again, that could really just be me. So
no, well, I mean, it could obviously, definitely different personalities behave different ways, but I mean, it also is a kind of social construct to a degree of I can behave the way I want to behave without impunity. And so why would I pay attention to the way other people behave when I don't need to meter my behavior to match theirs? In the end, I'm fine, right? And so it's something where I know, and I'm sure Tony will agree, you get that opposite kind of behavior for us sometimes, where we have to pick up the social culture, we have to adopt it. It's something I've been dealing with a lot here since I got into the role that I'm in at this company now, is you need to behave like us to survive here. You will not survive if you cannot behave in a way that is acceptable to us. Bring in code switching and all of the other things that minorities do that are part of that duality. It is rarely a message that non-minority Americans receive. The message they receive is typically the way you behave is fine. At the end of the day, nothing negative will come of you not in any way being receptive to the way we act. So like you were saying, that kind of gain of competency that you've had, where maybe you pay more attention than you did in the past, maybe you see some things as more insensitive than you did before, is so important, because a lot of people underestimate the power that they wield even when they are the minority in a region. I mean, you can have people who have been very harmful to minorities in areas where minorities are the majority there, but the power people wield is so deep that it affects students, it affects people who live in the community. So sometimes people think, even people who are like, well, I see everyone as equal and everyone's fine to me, they think that their actions do not have the weight that they have. And it's a message I would give to anyone. Your actions carry so much weight. So to think I am surrounded by, 82% Black people, so surely nothing I do can strongly negatively affect this community, is absolutely not true. So it's so important that, there's this constant journey of improvement and how we see how our behavior and our norms affect the norms of the people around us.
So let me go back real quick. Can you say that line again? You need to behave this way to belong here?
Not even belong here. You need to behave that way to survive. I mean, I've literally been in places where if I was not able to, code switching is one way to say it. And I think it's so important that I think we minimize code switching sometimes because we think that it is a superficial thing we do just to get by. But code switching is absolutely internalized white supremacy. It is us internalizing that this is the better way to behave. This brings you better outcomes. This is more positive than who I am naturally. And so we have internalized these customs. And if we hadn't, I think there are plenty of minorities who can honestly say they would not be able to accomplish. And that right there can tell you, I mean, how important that kind of stuff is as our culture moves. I've tried so hard to get away from it. I've tried to just be myself and speak the way I want to speak and be the way I want to be. And I think for my boss, she's great. She's so accustomed to my behavior. But honestly, when other people are around, I absolutely have to, or else what would I get? Hey, Susan, you're great. It's just not a good fit. We've noticed that side of things. So, and I'm sure Tony's smiling because he's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You definitely, when you start dealing with situations like that, if you don't assimilate well, you start dealing with microaggression type of comments, right? They may not be racial comments, but they're become microaggression. They start questioning your tone, your aggression, and so forth. So, no, I definitely agree with that. I wanted to, in regards to, I know this is about trying to improve our profession, and we're talking about modern racism. I wanted to ask a question real quick in regards to safe space, right? I've heard this across Twitterverse, AT for all, in regards to providing a safe space for our student athletes. And I think, for the most part, a lot of athletic trainers do this and they do it well in regards to injuries and illness. But I'd be curious to kind of hear y'all's perspectives in regards to within the AT community. Do you all feel that we're doing a great job of actually having a safe space for cultural diversity?
So here at Pasadena High School, my coworker that had been here for 38 years retired about 4 years ago. So this is my new coworker's third year. So I know there's always the statement of we don't discriminate based on race and gender and ethnicity and that kind of thing. But truly what I was looking for in a coworker to work alongside of me was a Hispanic female or a Spanish-speaking female. That was kind of like at the very top of the list. And I can't tell you the difference that it's made that Sophia she's 30, so she's 10 years younger. She's a different, I guess, generation or whatever it is. But she's also from Mexico, speaks Spanish fluently, and being able to see the students either speak where they speak English and Spanish at the same time, like mixing the words in, or speaking just in Spanish, it makes a huge difference to them and provides them a so much more comfortable, safe space. Like I continue to work on my Spanish, but I'll never be at that level to where I can just go off like they are. And I think that's been a huge shift, is including that diversity to make it a safe space. And I've talked about the podcast with Dr. Winkleman, and so one of the things that I do is, I make sure that I sit down because I'm a 6'1", bald, or thinly cropped, muscular white guy, which I've heard is intimidating. So I try to sit down, make sure I put myself in a position lower. There's definitely been improvements here, and then I think what we talked about in the beginning is as the younger athletic trainers become more and more advanced in the practice, and as the years go, we get more away from the old school mentality, like you're going to do this because I said so. Usually, okay, well, here we're going to do this, we need to do these 3 type of exercises, which do you want to do, that kind of thing. And just blending or giving them that ownership of healthcare, I think creates that safe space as well.
So I appreciate the comment. One of the reasons why I brought it up earlier throughout this year, 2020, 2021, we obviously had a lot of fatal deaths within the Black community, which caused a lot of tension within America and so forth. And, talking to a lot of people within the AT community, I know a lot of my white counterparts were having some challenging times with trying to actually connect with their POC students of color, right? Trying to be there for them, trying to provide that safe space for them. One of the questions I asked was, well, did they ever feel safe to talk to you about racial issues prior to actually dealing with the racial issue? Like if your athletic training room, again, it may be a safe space for injuries and illness, but was it actually a safe space to talk about racial situations, right? Did they actually feel that way? If not, don't think that somebody's going to come to you when they're actually in a, catastrophic event where they're actually dealing with something. They're not going to come to you with their in that moment. So again, that's the reason why I proposed the question is because I do believe there's layers to when we talk about safe space. It's just not about injuries and illness. Are we doing a good job of having a safe space that allows for cultural diversity, inclusivity, and just in general, allowing people to come in with different racial, religions, ethnic backgrounds, and feel comfortable to speak on it and to be themselves, their authentic selves.
I think.
Hey guys, so.
Oh, go ahead, Victoria.
No, you're good. You're good. So I just want to hop in that, like, I totally agree. So I am completely opposite of Jeremy. I'm East Texas. I'm in a predominantly white school. Like, I only have, I think, 2 minority teachers on my campus. My whole district, I think I have less than 10. And so, like, my office, I ask my kids, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, yeah, this injury. I'm like, no, how are you as a person doing? And then if they tell me, something's wrong, the first question I ask is, how can I help? I don't just assume that, like, I know the answers to everything, especially when it's, one of my students that isn't the same background as I am. Even if they're a white student, they may not come from the same background that I have. And it's just what do I need to do to help you? And it doesn't have to be athletic training. It can be as a person. Do I need to go talk to a teacher? Do I need to call home and see, do I need to talk to mom or dad or grandparents or whoever you're living with? Do you live with anybody? A lot of my kids, they live on their own, or they jump from couch to couch. And so it's kind of we can't just assume we know everybody. Just because you think somebody, might be of this certain class or this, certain religion. I mean, I have students that I didn't know were Jewish or were Muslim or atheist or anything like that, because we come from a predominantly Christian background. And it's like, you have to take that into account profession wise and just as a person. You have to treat them. And I know you guys hear this a lot and all athletic trainers do, but treat them as a person, not as their injury or as their illness.
Right.
So real quick, Dr. Tyree and Dr. Himmons are both watching live, commenting, saying you're doing great. So I just want to give that a little shout out. Again, as we're talking about the safe space, and those questions are so important. Like I said, when a student athlete comes in with an injury, hey, overall as a human being, so this is 100% of Susan today, and this is 10% where Susan's almost dead. What percent of Susan are you today? And then if they say 85, okay, well, what would make you closer to 100%? Well, more sleep or, less homework, that kind of thing. And I think those build the relationship, just like Tony was talking about. And definitely the addition of a Hispanic female in a predominantly Hispanic school changes that. But I think, one of the things that I talked about is, I may have made a race-based joke before, whereas if I do that now, I just talk about, well, I can't eat a jalapeno because I'm white, right? So it's not like something negative towards you, but it's like they look at my weakness kind of thing. Or like at the football game on Saturday, look at Jackson, he's all covered up head to toe. It's like, yeah, because I'm white and it's a 2:00 game, so I'll turn red, that kind of thing. So I think those help bridge the gap as long as it's, like, I guess, focused on me and not them. But we also talk about, hey, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? And then, or, well, Jackson, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? So those type of situations, they help, especially if there's one or two students in there and we're dealing with an injury, they're working on their rehab. And so then it's, hey, what are you doing for this? Or what does your family situation look like? Or that kind of thing. And I think what basically was Tony was saying is if you don't build that relationship, then it's not going to be a safe space. If all it is an injury, then it's not going to be a safe space for them to discuss the other things. And that's definitely something I've had to be intentional about and work on. And some I've learned from all these conversations with all these intelligent people via the podcast.
I definitely think you guys highlighted some awesome, good practices when it comes to a safe space, creating humor, especially I make myself the butt of jokes so often, and it definitely helps relax a lot of my guys most of the time. And then Victoria, like you were saying, kind of letting them lead and answer, not realizing, the answer is so helpful, but especially what you said, Jeremy, is there are gaps we cannot fill. And if you have such a large population with a gap you cannot fill because you cannot turn yourself into a Latino anytime soon, it is so important to find those people representation and put it there. That is so critical. I can't tell you how I feel when I look at even like some of our educational programs, and they are all about diversity. They're all about this, they're all about that. And I'm like, which one of you is going to turn into a Black female when I need you? None of you? Okay. That solution so needs to be there because there are things that we cannot provide. I have had employees come up to me and, a Black employee, and they are trying to tell me that they feel like they are being racially discriminated against, but even they don't know if they can say it out loud like that. So they're like, some people get treated this way. Some people get treated this way. And they will like literally point at a Black item and a white item. And they're like, do you catch my drift? I'm like, yes, I'm understanding exactly what you're trying to tell me. There is a 0% chance they would feel comfortable having that conversation with someone who is not Black like them. So, it's definitely not possible in every situation, right? Sometimes they're just going to be at a loss. And that is where, like you guys were saying, building the relationship, what Tony said, I feel like, and it's unfortunate for us as ATs because we are so overworked. I see so many of you guys in the secondary school setting. Oh my goodness, it's so much. There's so much to do. And the unfortunate part of that is I feel like we as athletic trainers lose out on one of the best parts about whatever clinical setting we're in, our clinical approach, which is we are there while people are healthy. We don't just have to see people when they're sick. So yes, of course, we can develop and build relationships in the athletic training room. What has been so powerful for me, especially in the industrial setting, has been being in that room as little as possible. Still got to obviously put the hours in there, but just watching my guys work perfectly healthily, great way to build a relationship. I was at Oktoberfest this past weekend we had, and watching my guys throw kegs perfectly healthy because everything is going well. We had I got a few blisters. I think one of our guys, like a keg took a little chunk out of his pinky, and some little things, but just being there, standing there while they are working as healthy individuals and building that relationship. Finding out about how, one guy's engagement went, finding out about how the other guy's goats are doing because for some reason he has goats, and finding out, these little things. I would have guys at my manufacturing plant. I would go out on the floor and I would just sit there while they were building on their machine and talk to them at length. Those are the people where when you want to have those deeper conversations or they have something really bothering them, they're willing to open up to you about it because you're so used to them outside of that room that they remember that. So that's just one thing. And I know, like I said, we're so busy. I see how busy people are, and it sucks because it's something that we're so good at. We have the opportunity to stand on the sideline and watch our people be healthy to a degree, sort of healthy, healthy and happy, and do what they do best. And that is such a great opportunity to build a relationship with people, is when they're up. Because when they're down, they're going to be like, I associate feeling good and happy and working and being healthy with Susan. I'm not that way right now, but I'm comfortable talking to her about that because I associate those positive emotions with her, not just when I'm injured. And I think that's been something that has helped me connect with people I have nothing in common with, AKA the people of small town middle of nowhere tire building, Texas and Arkansas. And that's really something that I hope we, as we get more staffed, will have the time to just be with healthy people and get to know them.
So
no, I definitely agree with that. Sorry, Tony.
No, you're good. I just wanted to emphasize, as y'all continue to move forward, the theme that I heard is representation matters. But go ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, like, I know me, and I posted this on Twitter this past weekend, but like, us as secondary school athletic trainers and me as a solo athletic trainer, and I mean, I know, Tony, you have an amazing staff down there, but like, sometimes we have to get away from the athletic setting. Like, our athletes, our patients, they see us as an athletic trainer and that we only work with athletes. I know my kids think I sleep here, which, let's be honest, sometimes I do. But like, going to the magic show with my theater program that's next week, like, I don't have to go to that. That's on a Saturday typically. Like, I'm at home sleeping, watching TV, but I'm going to go see my athletes and my patients at a high school magic show that's probably not that amazing, but to them, they've been working the past 12 weeks on perfecting, you know, these tricks and these shows. And when I show up and they see me in the audience, like, they're not going to associate me with sports and me with their injury. They're going to be like, Coach Morris showed up to my magic show. Like, that's awesome. Or some of my kids, you know, are in dance companies outside of the school that aren't associated with Elkhart at all. And if I go to that spring show and after the show, I'm like, hey, how are you? And they just get so excited and they're like, Coach Morris took time out of her weekend to show up to my show, you know, and they'll talk about that for weeks. And it even gives parents, like, I know my parents just love me and adore me for some reason. I don't really know why, but then, you know, they'll come to me like 2 or 3 weeks later. Hey, we saw you at so-and-so's, you know, brother's basketball game. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I had some free time. I decided to show up. And they're like, thank you. They talked about that for the rest of the night. You were the only person from the high school that showed up for that. And I think if we do that for those kids, then they're going to trust us more than they probably already do. And so when they have those major incidents in their lives, or they have, you know, things that are going on that they wouldn't normally tell anybody else about, they're like, well, I'm going to tell Coach Morris because she's always been there for me no matter what. Maybe she can find a way to help me. So I think as athletic trainers, especially in the secondary setting, we need to find those moments, however fleeting they may be. We need to find those moments to be there for our athletes outside of athletics.
Well, yeah, for any individual, regardless of what race, if you want them to open up, they need to know you care first, right? I think we can all agree to that. Like, if you want them to actually open up to you and operate with you, we have to do a great job as athletic trainers to show them that we care about them first, right? And that kind of revolves around the patient-centered care model and so forth. Just to kind of keep the theme rolling, you know, in regards to safe space, one of the challenges and one of the key terms that I wanted to bring up or revisit is microaggression, right? I think when we talk about modern racism, there's a lot of things that are said in our atmosphere that you can't necessarily pinpoint that that's racist. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in a marginalized community is we feel it. We feel the condescending tone. We feel the lack of respect when something is said. We feel the belittling comment. But at the same time, if I put it on paper and I sent it up, you know, somebody will, that's not necessarily racist. Okay. And that's very challenging. So in regards to safe space, I'm just kind of curious, do we acknowledge the microaggression statements? Are we able to acknowledge that? Are we at that moment now? And then if we are able to acknowledge it, what are we doing to address it in order to actually maintain a safe space? And do I need to provide some examples of what microaggression may look like?
I would totally I come from I know what you're coming from. Because I'm going to be honest, like I've said it and I've done it and I don't realize that it comes out until either after or somebody corrects me. And I'm like, the minute somebody corrects me, I take that criticism. I'm like, okay, explain to me. And I don't mean to be rude. I'm just like, explain to me how I said it or what I said so that I don't do it again. because it's the whole point. They're not, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please. But the whole point of, you know, the constructive criticism when they tell you that like, hey, this is a microaggression or this offended me is because they're trying to help us. They're trying to help me understand, like, don't do it again. Like, you know, it offended me, it's going to offend others. And I take that to heart and I'm like, okay, I want to know what I did wrong so I don't do even something similar to it. Like if it's the tone, explain to me, you know, and tell me the way I told you. Like if it's really condescending, say it exactly the same way I told you. Don't sugarcoat it for me, because it's my fault. It's not yours. Like I'm the one who offended you in some way. So don't make me feel better. Like that's not, I mean, I shouldn't be the one who feels bad in this situation. And so like, I would definitely like to know more microaggressions so that I can keep myself from saying it or doing it, for sure.
I'll go back to my previous statement as whereas I don't do a lot of self-reflection. I don't catch those things unless somebody points them out. And I don't know that I've had anybody point out anything here in the athletic training facility or on the campus. Maybe on social media, some people have. And then again, similar to what Victoria was saying, is like, okay, can you explain it to me? Because I'm lost, right? And so actually, Susan was one of the ones that pointed out something, because I said something to a Hispanic female, and I said, asked a question, then it said gracias at the end, because that's the way you say thank you in Spanish. Well, for me, I say it all the time. Like I said, I speak Spanish. I work in a predominantly Hispanic school. I'll say it to anyone, anywhere. You know, even if you're the whitest person, don't know any Spanish, I might just say it just because that's a habit. And she's like, you know, that could be considered because you're saying it this way. And I'm like, what? But that's just because of me. This is who I am. And, you know, I'm me, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do, regardless of what you're going to do. So I don't feel like anybody said anything to me specifically. And again, maybe that's because of I'm not open to that, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some other reasons.
That's a good example that you brought up. I was literally just thinking about that when you said social media. But I would say they're micro for a reason. Kind of when Tony says microaggressions is, especially in that scenario that you referenced, it wasn't even so much that. It's often, and this is what I will tell people when it comes to determining if what you're saying is a microaggression or not. The point of a microaggression is it is something that is relatively benign, that normally has no negative connotation at all until it is in a certain moment, right? So I think the conversation there was something about some particular race-based, I forget what the main question was. And basically what was coming from Alex, and I think there was one more person, was, how is this not obvious to you? It's not our job to educate you on this topic, was kind of what was happening on one side of the conversation. And that's a scenario where I can't tell you how many times then little things that we do that normally mean nothing carry weight with them. So definitely am not, and I can even say on that one, saying, you know, using words that you use constantly on a regular basis are going to be offensive to someone in their own right. A lot of things are not offensive to me when they stand alone, when they are partnered with a certain conversation or when they are partnered with a certain event. They can become a microaggression. And like Anthony said, when you write it on paper, it makes no sense. They're like, what is this? This is nothing. What are you upset about? What are you upset about? And it's like, if you were there, you would know how offensive this is. And it's something I see at work all the time. I mean, people will just be speaking to you and I'm just like, oh, it's so toxic, honestly, sometimes. And it's the same thing that if coming from another person, hence why our relationships are important. Like you were saying, Jeremy, you tell jokes about yourself. And I'm sure your students ideally joke with you, you know, as the relationship grows. Where another random white guy saying that to them, even if they were joking about themselves, is like, okay, dude, cool. Thanks, man. It becomes, what is the purpose of what you're saying to me? And that is something I would encourage people to think about. And Tony, you can embellish on this since you had brought up the topic, is if you have someone that you don't have a good relationship with, it helps to think, what will this act or word or saying, what will that bring? What will that add to the conversation? Because it's easy for people to just throw things in there and they're creating tension that doesn't need to exist. So it's not, I was not trying to harp on that, Jeremy. I'm sorry if you saw it that way. I was just saying that in general, it's the overarching interaction is what determines if something is a microaggression or not. I think that's the best way to say it, Tony.
No, and just to add, I think, Susan made a key point, like we have to understand, the level of relationships that we're in, how many layers have been peeled back in regards to actually growing a relationship with someone to understand the comments that we can comfortably make. So again, if you don't have a strong relationship with somebody, I think the key term to actually bring up is, NAT, I think did a great job this year, is cultural competency, like actually taking the time to learn and to gain a little bit better insight on different cultures and to become more competent, especially when you interact with people that you don't know well. Because the reality is you can actually gain a strong relationship with somebody who is not within your race, and you can probably within your own circle make all the racial comments y'all want because y'all understand each other, y'all have a level of love and respect for one another, and y'all go down that path with one another. But when you're working in a professional setting, and especially a secondary school, and you're working with minors, it is really important that we have a great understanding of cultural competence so that we aren't making comments, or more importantly, one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is allowing for those comments, okay, amongst student athletes, amongst your student aides to athletes, or student aides to student aides. And that's why I asked the question, are we actually able to recognize those as well, right? Not even just for ourselves, but amongst our students. Are we able to recognize those microaggression comments? And are we able to effectively address them, educate, right? So if we're not educated on cultural competency, then we're not really going to be able to do a great job in regards to helping out our youth and helping them grow and address this at an early age. So, for the people who are listening to this, and it's the reason why I brought it up, I strongly encourage to educate ourselves, okay, to continue to get in discussions, not just with people within your race, but people outside of your race. Continue to have healthy discussions so that we can truly grow and make some changes and actually start to develop a true safe space in our sports facilities.
What you said right there was so important, Tony, is that your relationship means everything. When you don't have a relationship with someone, be so careful. And again, it runs into a thing where some people feel like they need to be careful about how they behave, and others are a little bit more comfortable just behaving how they do. We recently had an interaction on social media. It wasn't with any of us here, it was a leader, honestly, in the NATA. And they used the term yellow to describe Asian people. And I remember because Mike Martinez was trying to educate, and so is Alex, about how that term is not appropriate. And what this leader came back with, she said, oh, my Asian friends were never bothered by it. Okay, these are not your friends. These are not your friends. And when you are using terms that are, one, such a very common slur, the answer of my friends let me do it is never an excuse, is something I will say. So as you do develop a deeper relationship with people, definitely there are things that best friends say to each other you cannot turn around and say to a patient that you met 30 minutes ago. You just cannot. That is not your best friend. And again, adds that other layer of why it's so important to build these relationships with people. I mean, I have, even to my Middle Eastern friends, I will ask, is this is this appropriate? Is this inappropriate? Is this rude? Can I say this back to you? If, someone says it to me, and they will tell me yes, no, depends. So I'm sure for you, Jeremy, Sophia, is that her name? I'm sure, does having her help you, navigate some things of, oh, can I do that? Can I say that? Or is that not?
Oh, there's tons of times I'm like, hey, because like I said, she was born in Mexico. She lived her first 9 or 10 years of her life in Mexico. So her parents, are Mexican, that kind of thing. And so I ask questions like, so in your family or in Mexico, or even her name is Sofia. And then on the donut box that we had for the kids, they wrote Sophia. I was like, hey, is that normally like the way the white people spell it? And she's like, yeah, everybody I know that is Hispanic is an F. And so, those kind of things, like we have a really good relationship, and I ask her questions like that all the time. And again, I think it's just because, like I said, I don't know if culturally competent, but I ask questions because if I don't know something, then I figure I want to know. But she's really good about answering those questions or relating those things. Say, this is the way that we would normally do this, that kind of thing. So
right.
I'm super blessed. Like I'm so thankful that Sophia was the one that we hired because it's been a really great fit.
So then I guess a good question is, how do you educate yourself for the people who don't have a Sophia, right? How do you educate yourself or was that education happening, or was it just like, oh, I think this is fine? Like, what would you say for people who is that education happening? Because for some people, like, where would you tell them to go? What's the easiest place to look for that information? Or, and again, a lot of people just they just roll through and they're like, someone will stop me in my tracks if it's really bad. Otherwise, I'm doing okay. What would you advise people?
Well, Tony talked about the relationship, and I think if you can have those conversations with your students, and how you just said, hey, is it okay if I say this, or how does this affect you, that kind of thing. I would think that those people, whoever you're around most, just saying, hey, look, I'm kind of an idiot. If you just set it up like that, hey, I'm kind of an idiot. I just say and do things because it seems like it makes sense to me. Can you help me be better? And then putting those people around you, or going to those people intentionally. I've talked about, we have 2 Black foster daughters, and we're hoping to adopt them. And when we first got them, I asked one of my Black students, hey, so I've heard something about black hair and you're not supposed to wash it. Can you just tell me about it? And then, one of the coaches I was pretty good friends with, and I was like, hey, as they're talking about these superheroes, did you have somebody that you looked up to? And so for me, it's not like just that one person, but it's just asking those questions of the different people around you. And I know Victoria said that there's only like 2 minority teachers around, and it's almost all white, in and around her school. And so it's a little bit harder. Victoria, what are your thoughts, and how are you doing that?
Well, so actually, that was going to be my question for Susan and Anthony, is because I don't hardly have anybody to go to on my campus. Like, my basketball coach is our only coach that's not white. And I think my only other person on my campus that is not a white teacher, and a white female at that, like I don't really have any males unless they're coaches, is our Spanish teacher. And so like, I don't get to go over to that side of campus, or, always have time to email him and ask. And so for me, I don't get a lot of educational stuff. And there are some things that I don't want to ask my athletes. Like, sure, like I'm going to, if I'm talking with them or whatever, but there are some things like, I'm not going to ask a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid, like, hey, what do I do in this situation? So sometimes I feel like I'm bugging my boys basketball coach, because I'm like, I need help here. Like, do I say this? Is this wrong? And he seems okay with it, but let's be real. If somebody comes to you asking like 50 million questions kind of on the same topic, like, deep down, like he's like, okay, find somebody else to ask. It's like, I have other things to do, especially right now. He's in season. So like, my question was, where can I go besides my coach or my superintendent who is Black? Like, who else? Where else do I go?
I'll keep my response short, and I'll let Susan probably elaborate. first thing I just want to emphasize, if we're talking about modern racism, we're talking about the modern culture, I will say that it's a little dicey, right? Because I do think the energy of the POC environment is starting to get a little exhausted and fatigued of feeling like we need to educate about how to treat us right. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. So I would be careful. So, and what I mean by be careful is make sure that you stay in tune with people that you have a strong relationship with, and, you know, strong level of respect. Just going to any and everybody can be a little dicey, and it can be very challenging. The reality is, for example, I'm speaking specifically for athletic training, there were a lot of cultural competency courses provided by NATA. That would be the first place I would direct. We had a lot of great speakers that continue to do a good job of providing evidence-based information, or just good critical information, period. So that would be my first thought, and my first perspective for you all is to actually take the time to do your research. And it's just like when you work with your students. The last thing you want is your student, you just sat there and you gave them instructions, but they didn't take the time to read. They didn't take the time to look over the journal article. They didn't take the time to sit down and critically think. They just, 2 minutes after you got done with your instructions, they're asking all these questions. Why? Because they don't want to really take the effort themselves to look through information and figure out some things themselves. So it's the same perspective here. We're talking about this now. And for the people who take the time to listen, I strongly encourage, before reaching out, please take some time to do the research. Please take some time to gather information. And then your questions should be proposed after you do the reading. All right, I read this. This information makes sense, but I'm still struggling with this. I think that will be more well received as you're really trying to learn, versus just, well, what do I do here? What do I do here? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I'll shut it down from there.
No, I so agree. I was going to say, oh, the tribulation of being the only Black person around. That is its own whole arena. But absolutely what you said, Tony, the internet is a wonderful thing. There are so many questions that will be answered there. Now, when you're getting to some particulars, obviously it's great to have someone around help with that. Again, gets back to, like you were saying, Jeremy, especially with your foster children, with your foster daughters, representation is everything. And kind of what Tony was alluding to is, especially when minorities are available in limited supply, like in your case, Victoria, they kind of become your like surrogate. It can feel that way, whether they actually are. They become your like surrogate, like dictionary or like Wikipedia for things. And that's definitely not the feeling you want them to have out there. So researching, looking things up, when you're in a place where like you are, Jeremy, I would almost say getting representation for them, putting people in their lives, in your own life, if it's available, that can answer those questions for them, so that you're not always asking, a million people or having to look everything up. I definitely think that is a scenario where getting them representation for themselves, someone they can look up to, someone they can ask questions to. They're not going to want to have to ask you every question, be like, can you go ask somebody this very particular thing about me as a small Black female child that I need an answer for? So representation is going to be so important for them. But yes, Tony, the fatigue is real. And that again is, I've seen spats happen with it, and also knowing your people. There are some people who really want to educate. They're all about it. They will answer big questions. They will answer little questions. They love talking about the dynamics. I would almost say I'm kind of one of them, but the fatigue happens. And like Tony said, there is a level of effort that is expected to be put in before questions start coming out, because some things are truly so obvious. And I think that again slides into that idea of the privilege of not having to change how you behave. So there's less of a burden to need to find out about how other people behave around you or other cultures behave, that I honestly encourage people to take upon yourselves. Take upon a bit of a burden of, it's my responsibility to put in my own personal effort to find out about X. And then what's left over, definitely representation will take care of that because you have people around to fill in the blanks. So I would say when you don't have that representation around to ask questions to, you get the misguided effort is what I call that. People who have tried, but it's like, you are so off base. Where did you find that information? And then when you don't even have that effort, you have cultural incompetency, I would say. You have people who are frankly offensive, who are at that zero level. So being halfway there is important. I think personally, having someone to ask is more important than going solo on your own and trying to develop your own answers. But the perfect world is truly both. Looking up your own, educating yourself, and then having people to ask questions to will really make it easy for you to constantly be on the right side of things in that regard. So yeah, I hope that. Is that the embellishment you wanted, Tony?
Oh yeah, appreciate it.
No, so that actually like really helps me. So I mean, I don't know if you guys saw us putting notes because they're for myself. But like, I mean, yeah, definitely you need to look things up. And I think Tony explained it so well, especially me teaching kids right now. I'm having this problem that like, yeah, you give an assignment and then it's what do we do on the assignment? Well, did you literally read the instructions at the top? Did you take 2 seconds to read the 2 sentences I put at the top? And like, we can apply that to this situation as well. Did you take the 5 minutes to go Google search it? Or, I mean, we say this all the time on Twitter, like people ask, you know, random questions, or at least we think they're random. I'm like, did you at least go Google it first? Like, and then if you didn't find an answer, or you have a specific, like one specific thing, like, I don't know what this word means, or I don't know what this sentence means, then like ask questions on it. And that's what I tend to do. Like I Google it, but I'm like, I don't know what this sentence is trying to say. Like, what's the meaning of this paragraph? And then I'll go and I'll be like, hey, can you explain this to me in simple terms? Can you like dumb this down for me so that I don't misinterpret what it's saying? Because that's the least thing I want to do. Like, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I read it, I'm so smart. And then it's like, no, I misinterpreted what they were saying or what the person was trying to convey, for sure.
Right.
So one of the things I wanted to emphasize, as I know we're kind of getting close on end time for the audience, is in regards to, you know, addressing this modern racism, if you haven't been intentional already, start to be intentional in regards to embracing other people's race and cultures. And that does involve asking questions, but celebrating people's difference within their race, differences within their cultures. Like, that's how you embrace it. Start to learn, start to educate yourself about it, but then also celebrate, right? If we're talking about, you know, showing love towards our student athletes and our student aides, or just our community, if we're talking about supporting them, that involves celebrating them. That involves learning about them and celebrating them as well. And that is one particular strategy or one particular way that I think would really benefit a lot of our, you know, athletic training safe spaces in regards to really growing that and really making sure that people feel embraced, people feel loved, people feel supported, is by, again, learning about them, celebrating them, and embracing their culture. I think we have to be very intentional about that as we continue to move forward.
I totally agree, especially with the being intentional. Read How to Be an Anti-Racist if you haven't yet, because people think it's, oh, you're either good or you're bad, or you're either like racist or you're not racist. And that's so not it. You have, and in my opinion, I'd say like 2 versions of people who are not racist, right? So most people are like, oh, you're not racist, you're fine, we're good, let's keep it rolling. But you have your, as they're called, kind of your assimilationists who are like, I'm not racist, but I'm so very benign about it. Like, I'm not really doing anything to help move us toward a future without racism, right? And then you have your anti-racists, and the encouragement of people to be so intentional about combating discrimination, racism, stereotypes, and so on. It has to grow. There has to be more of it. I mean, truly, I feel like probably in the last 6 years, we have seen the power of people who can comfortably assimilate and not do anything. And it makes it so difficult because you can't only have a few people who are being intentional about it. It's not comfortable. It's a lot of work. And it's especially a lot of work because most of the people who choose to be intentional, they don't have to. Right? It's kind of exhausting, just like it's exhausting for minorities who have to directly combat this stuff and don't have the choice. It's exhausting work. And when you have the option to not do it and just not be a racist person, I absolutely see how it's very attractive for a lot of athletic trainers in our community to just be like, well, I take care of my patients and I do a good job and I'm not racist. So I've done my work for the day. But if they could do things like give their student athletes representation, learn more about their student athletes and who they are outside of the sport, outside of their injuries, learn more to see them as individuals instead of these general categories of people. I mean, there's so many things that we can do. And I absolutely agree with Tony on just being so intentional about every day doing a little bit more. When you have the choice to do nothing, but you can do something, do something. Do something to contribute more to that.
I have one more point. I know we don't have a lot more time for discussion, but I just want to get this out into the atmosphere, right? We talk about equality versus equity, right? And, in regards to healthcare, understand that, when we're talking about equality, that's when we're just trying to, make sure everybody has the same access, the same level of care and so forth. And I think that's important that we do ensure that all our patients have the same access and level of care. But we also have to understand that some people are still coming to you and they don't have the same equity, right? They are not provided the same means to really get through. So what I mean by that is, although we're providing, so although we may provide, the same level of service, understand that somebody may need a little bit more, right? Somebody's insurance policy may not be the same, right? So although we have a hospital or we have a physician office that is, available to all our student athletes, well, that's the equality aspect of it. But we need to continue to dive a little bit further in regards to our resources. That particular student athlete may not have the insurance policy to go to what you have made equally for everybody. Okay. So the equity part of it is about making sure that we are actually peeling back the layers to ensure that everybody can operate on the same playing field so that they can be successful. They're afforded the same opportunities to truly be successful within healthcare. Mm-hmm. So that's just one example that I wanted to touch base on. But again, we need to look at, making sure that, yes, we do have equality, but in regards to sports medicine and looking at our system of care, is it also, providing equity for our student athletes?
Well, I will even add a macro version of what Tony's saying. And I kind of wanted to talk about this, and I will just briefly touch on it. But as we talk about equity versus equality, I wanted to talk a bit about reframing privilege, because I feel like people struggle with the definition of privilege so much, especially as people all over experience hardship, right? I feel like times have really changed of late, and it's getting harder for people to understand because things aren't as lined out as simply as they used to be when it came to explaining privilege and how privilege worked. And one thing that I've kind of moved towards with reframing privilege for people is, what happens when making something harder or more difficult doesn't affect you? That's privilege to me. So on a macro scale, I would even look at our profession as a whole, some of the changes that we're making, right? Entry-level masters now is a thing. We're reframing how we're doing our continuing education. We're, as things change, I think some of the important conversations for us to have is, for some of us, some of these changes happening make no difference to us. Making this harder to access, making this harder to accomplish, making this harder to do doesn't make it harder for me, so I don't care. And I think a really important question to ask when we're deciding these things is, are we ensuring that we are, one, who are we making this harder for? Who is likely to be cut out when we make this change? And what are we doing to ensure access for those people? That's kind of how I feel like privilege is changing as we go through life. And I'm seeing a lot of things becoming more expensive, becoming more difficult. Healthcare, I mean, honestly, has been so expensive for some people. Even sports, as we see sports go off into needing to be a part of a club to access certain opportunities in sports, or needing to dedicate more time and energy, which some students, their parents do not have that time or energy. If your school is making these decisions for an early practice or a super late practice, who are we making this harder for? How are we making sure people who would be cut out still have access to doing these things? I think are ways to kind of scale out that conversation about equity versus equality. But yeah.
Man,
Sorry, I'm just over here. I'm making notes. I'm like everything you guys are saying. Like I have this, like 3 of these pages are full of notes. So hopefully I can decipher my writing. But no, I mean, I'm just gonna go off, Susan, the last point you made. Like just making sure that we're understanding who we're cutting out. Like I'm not gonna lie, I don't think about that. So like I have early morning treatments. I know you guys have seen I've had like a bunch of kids stop by this morning, but like I'm like, you have to be here from 7 to 8. Like that's your only time. But then I have kids like, oh, I have to ride the bus. And it's like, oh yeah, like you're not gonna get here till 7:40. And then it's like, okay, well, you can come after school. Well, yeah, but I have to ride the bus home after school. And it's like, oh. And then it's sitting down with, our admin and be like, hey, when can this kid come in? Can they come in during lunch? Can they come in during an elective? Because they need me. Like they need to see me. They're injured. But if they can only come these 2 times, we're doing them a disservice. Like I'm here as their athletic trainer, but they're not getting access to me. And when you bring that up, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to go back and sit down with some kids and be like, hey, let's work on our schedule and find out when can you get up here and when is it convenient for you to get your 30 minutes, 45 minutes of rehab. So that's what I'm going to spend my afternoon doing today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, there are things that are so small, but they help us reframe. I mean, I feel like something that's been a roadblock for a lot of people is making things better for a particular group of people, dwindling things down so narrow, and then you get all this resistance. And it's just so much easier to just look at a situation and say, who is being left out? Who's being cut out? How do we give them access where they need it, especially when changes. I use it a lot when changes are made. I say a lot of the time when you have volunteer positions that require, say, 25 hours a month of free time, you're going to get the people who can afford to volunteer 24 hours or 25 hours a month of their free time. You got to think of that. Who are we cutting out who we could use their opinion, use their perspective, because you're narrowing your group down when you create, things that could be seen as obstacles.
Yeah. All right. I know Tony said he has to go. Tony, what's going to be the best way to get a hold of you if someone wants to continue the conversation or just follow along with what you're doing?
Best way to get a hold of me? Ooh, do I want to get out there? Let's see here. The reality is, if you really do want to get a hold of me, you can email me. I'm okay with that. So let's see here, anthony.hunter@57@yahoo.com. that would probably be the best way to get a hold of me if you wanted to sit down and actually talk about some other things. I don't have any personal social media, and I purposely keep it that way. But yeah, I appreciate the time, y'all. I appreciate the opportunity. It's a great conversation. I hope we were able to get the appropriate messages out there in reference to this topic.
And then Walton Sports Med, if you're on social media, you can probably find Tony that way as well. And definitely, if you just happen to have some free funds, you could throw it towards their project of trying to get a gator or golf cart for their sports medicine program. I know Tony wouldn't have mentioned that, but I've been trying to help him out as much as I can, retweet or whatever he's doing on Donors Choose. So check out Walton Sports Med for Tony. Susan, best way to get a hold of you?
Twitter. IMASTAAH on Twitter. Just feel free to reach out, like or comment or reply to something, okay? Because DMs get creepy, guys. The whole message request file, I don't like digging in there too often. It gets kind of scary. But yes, you can absolutely find me on Twitter. And absolutely, that's the easiest way to reach me. If you have any questions, especially if you want to know more about industrial athletic training, I got you. So,
Victoria?
So the best way to reach me, I'm like Tony, man. Like, I guess Twitter is going to be the best way because honestly, I don't get to check my email very much. I mean, like right now, this is the most I've ever spent at my desk in a long time. So follow me on Twitter. I think it's Morris_ATC. And again, comment or retweet or something because like Susan said, DMs, oof. I mean, like there's probably some really important messages in there that I'm just like, I don't want to go through that recent request. But if anybody does want to email me, it's bmorris, MORRIS @elkhartisd.org. That's probably the only email I'm going to check. So.
Yeah, Susan, I believe it was Susan that included How to Be an Anti-Racist, Stamped from the Beginning, and White Like Me as books. One of the books that I read from Emmanuel Acho was Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and we actually bought the Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy for our kids to read, and so I know my oldest son has read through that twice, and again, just beginning those conversations with them there. I still need to read How to Be an Anti-Racist. I know my wife read it, and we've talked about some of the stuff, but I need to read those as well. This is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/modern racism. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/modern racism. For Jeremy, Susan, Tony, Victoria, and the Sports Medicine Broadcast, that is a wrap. Thanks.